For nearly 250 years, human slavery was practiced in America. It began in 1619 when 20 African slaves were imported to Jamestown, Virginia. 60 years later, slaves were essential to the growing agrarian economy. Over the next 2 centuries, more than 600,000 Africans were forcibly transplanted to the New World. At the founding of America in the late 1700s, our leaders deliberately excluded slaves from our new freedoms. Thomas Jefferson serves as an example of early American inconsistency. He wrote eloquently about extending liberty to all men, but continued to own and exploit slaves until his death, 50 years after America's founding. Most Americans shared Jefferson's hypocrisy. Slaves in all 13 original states worked without wages and were denied educational opportunities. Their families were often separated for economic purposes. Nonetheless, slavery was an accepted practice, a normal part of life that went largely unchallenged. For generations, America's churches were silent. Even among those who acknowledged the injustice, freeing hundreds of thousands of uneducated slaves was too impractical. The economic fallout would be too severe. They were in too deep. It was a staggering blind spot. An effective movement to end slavery did not begin until the early 1800s. Nearly all the leaders of the abolition movement were committed Christians who served as unwelcome prophets for their nation and their churches. Conflict over slavery and states' rights came to a head in the mid-1860s. Our Civil War settled the questions, but at an astounding cost. More Americans died fighting the Civil War than in all other American wars combined.
I can see clearly now the rain has gone.
We all have an anatomic blind spot, a part of our retina that has no sensory cells. To make up for it, God gave us a complex system that blends in adjacent sensory data to obscure the holes. As a result, we can't sense that we're missing anything. We can't see what we don't see. Spiritual blind spots function in the same way. Like slaveholding America of the 17th century, we can become so accustomed to the world around us that we can't detect dangerous inconsistencies. Even when the truth is clearly revealed, we are capable of constructing justifications and excuses that conceal our sinful behavior. Both the Gospel of Luke and the book of Acts were written by a first-century doctor. 2 closely related themes appear more than any other in the Gospel of Luke. Even though these themes are developed in 12 of Luke's 24 chapters, most Bible-believing Christians are unaware of their prominent place in Jesus' teaching. Missing these 2 themes in the Gospels is like reading a John Grisham novel and missing the lawyers. Chapter 1. Following the announcement from the angel Gabriel that she will bear the Christ, Mary declares, "He has filled the hungry with good things, but has sent the rich away empty." Chapter 4. Jesus begins public ministry in his hometown synagogue. His first sermon text, "The Spirit of the Lord is on me because he has anointed me to preach good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to release the oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." Chapter 6. Luke's complement to the Beatitudes of Matthew's Gospel. Like Matthew, Luke has "Blessed are you" sections, but also has corresponding curses. "But woe to you who are rich, for you have already received your comfort. Woe to you who are well fed now, for you will go hungry." Chapter 12. When asked by someone in the crowd to get involved in a family money dispute, Jesus tells the story of a rich fool who hoarded his wealth at the cost of his soul. Chapter 16. An entire chapter about the dangers of wealth and the priority of serving the needy. The chapter concludes with the story of a rich man sent to hell for not helping a poor man at his doorstep. Chapter 18. In the familiar story of the rich young ruler who chooses not to follow Jesus because of his great wealth, Jesus responds, how hard it is for the rich to enter the kingdom of God. Indeed, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. Multiple other passages press the same points. First, money is a spiritually dangerous idol that can separate us from the joy of God and His glory. Secondly, true disciples give generously and sacrificially to the needy. The sheer amount of material dedicated to those two themes is undeniable. The repeated emphasis is not a coincidence, but rather an example of what Bible scholars call the principle of proportion. Things that are more important get repeated and expanded. In comparison, there are only 3 references to sexual immorality in the Gospel of Luke. All of them are made in passing, without significant expansion or discussion. This fact illustrates how powerfully our blind spot functions. If a Christian claimed to love God and the Bible, to participate in church activities, but also took regular trips to Asia to enjoy sexual pleasures with young prostitutes, we would seriously question the reality of his faith. On the other hand, if another professed believer avoided sexual immorality, but eagerly acquired wealth and gave little or nothing to the poor, we wouldn't think twice about the genuineness of his faith. This despite an overwhelming number of gospel passages that warn against those very behaviors. Despite the fact that there are 2 billion people in the world today who subsist on less than $2 a day. Despite millions of needy people in our own nation.